Okay, well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good.
Still alive.
So, today you are in store for a treat. Not a literal treat. I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait till at least after midterm for a literal treat. And if you make this attendance goal, you're going to get a bunch of treats in due course. But for today, we're going to talk about text expression in the 16th century. Okay, text expression, and in order to look at how text became expressed musically in the 16th century, we are going to focus in on especially a composer named Orlando di Lasso, and we're going to focus in on a genre called the Italian Madrigal. This is the 16th century Italian Madrigal. Remember, we talked about a madrigal earlier, the 13th century Madrigal. Now we're talking about the 16th century Madrigal, which is a totally different genre than the earlier one. But remind me, how many of you have sung an Italian Madrigal in a choir at some point or another? This is an Italian song, this choral from the 16th century. Yeah, or maybe an English Madrigal, right? Thomas Morley, Thomas Weelkes, and others. Okay, so first I would like to tell you about Orlando di Lasso. Orlando di Lasso. If you recall, when we talked about Du Fay as a prototypical Renaissance composer of the 15th century, one of the things I mentioned was that he was cosmopolitan, right? That is, he was not just stuck in one region learning one style, but instead he was well versed in styles across continental Europe. You remember this? Okay? And this was a characteristic of many Renaissance composers, and it's true of Orlando di Lasso as well. So I would like to demonstrate for you his cosmopolitanism by playing 4 songs for you. If you would get out your anthologies right now, keep them handy. We're going to be looking at texts. And we're also, along the way, going to be discussing some humor in music. We're going to be exposed to some musical humor by good old Orlando di Lasso. If you would turn to number 58, page 212, to get us started. Okay. Number 58. Okay. Orlando di Lasso lived 1532 to 1594. So he was active the entire second half of the 16th century. Okay? And he was Franco-Flemish, but traveled all around the continent, ended up in Italy. He spoke French, he spoke Latin, he spoke German, he spoke Italian, okay? And he used all of these languages in his compositions, as we will see shortly. So what is the main genre? Here's a review for you. What's the main genre in the French language? The chanson, right? We talked about the forme fixe. We talked about like the virelai, the ballade, and the rondeau. Those are the forme fixe. We also talked about Machaut in the chanson. We talked about Du Fay in the chanson. Now Orlando di Lasso is also writing a chanson. May I have, please, a volunteer to read this poem? Je l'aime bien. Can someone read that for us? Go ahead, Dana.
I love her and shall love her. Thus I am and shall be, and shall remain for all my life. And no matter how much one should envy me, I love her and shall love her.
I love her and shall love her. Okay, so tell me, does this seem like a courtly love poem or a fin amour poem? Your instincts are right. You're going like this. Why?
Because there's nothing that goes wrong.
Okay, and so because there's nothing that goes wrong, yeah. What do we expect in a fin amour poem? Unrequited love, right? What's the arc of that poem? He sees her from afar. He's deeply in love with her, right? She's married to some other guy, and he will die in despair, right? That's kind of like the arc. So you see that this does not have that kind of narrative arc, right? In fact, it's quite short. It's one stanza. And do we know if she loves him back? No, her perspective is not shared with us. Okay? So I say that to update us now. We're no longer talking about courtly love. In the Renaissance, we're talking about other things. A lot of times poems can be far more telegraphic. Okay, maybe they show an impression of an emotion, and we don't get the whole story, okay, which is the case here. So let's listen to this. This is Je l'aime bien. It's a chanson. This is Anthology 1A by Orlando di Lasso. Okay, what do you hear in this piece? Anything that you recognize, any styles, any techniques that you recognize? Yes?
I feel like there's some imitation.
Some imitation, absolutely. Very sparse, but it's there, right? This is a nod to what style that was developed right around the mid-16th century. We talked about it last time. This is a review, right? Pervasive imitation, yes, which developed into what style? Ars perfecta, right? Ars perfecta, which deals very controlled with consonances and dissonances and counterpoints and all that. Okay, so in this piece, what we have is a merging of a chanson style and some ars perfecta techniques. Okay, remember in that lecture and that last lecture, the post-Josquin generation was right in the 1550s, right, 1520s to 1560s. And when was this piece written? Right around 1555. So this is in the sweet spot. What we're seeing here is the influence of church style across sacred secular boundaries. Okay? Notice also that it is a top-down style, what we would call cantilena style, and we have 4 voices. There's no structural tenor, right? We have voice ranges, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Yes? Okay, so this is fitting right in with what we expect of a piece in the mid-16th century. Okay, now this is kind of a nice love song, right? Did you think that was kind of pretty, sweet? Yeah? Okay, Orlando di Lasso could get a little rowdy. Just a little rowdy, and I want to show you that in this next piece. This piece is not in French, this is in Italian. Remember I said Lasso spoke all of these languages. And this is a piece called Madonna mia cara. Now, you need to know what the setup of this piece is to get the joke. This piece is sung from the perspective of a German soldier. Okay? A German soldier who is in Italy and is trying to seduce an Italian woman in Italian. The problem is he does not speak Italian very well. Okay? So the people who translated this tried to take this into account and kind of give you the idea of what the joke is. So I will read this for you now. English translation. Remember, this is in Italian by a German trying to speak Italian. Okay? My lady, my darling, me want to sing song on the window. Soldier is good companion, yeah? Dum 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 diddy diddy dum. Please listen to me that me sing so good and me love you. As much as wine and capon. Dum 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 diddy diddy dum. Right? And I'll stop at that verse before it gets rated R. So you can read the rest on your own. But you get the idea, right? You get the idea. And so it's a joke. It's a joke. And there are going to be little bubbles of laughter as you all kind of realize what this song is about. How about this? How about this? Listen, let's hear it, okay? And follow along with the Italian and in translation. Don't look at the music, look at the translation and try to follow along with what is being said here. So this is Madonna mia cara. It's a humorous piece. I do want to tell you, the genre of this piece is called a villanella. It's an Italian villanella. And let's listen to it now. get the idea, right? This is an Italian song. It's very homophonic. So the joke is the delivery here, right? The persona of the German. But what else? Remember we talked about what's the chief aim of the French in their music, right? What's their chief aim?
Very mathematical.
Mathematical, very complex, very high, almost at a later time we would call it almost a sublime goal, right? Now, what did I tell you about the Italians, the Trecento style? Far more down to earth, right? This is an Italian style, far more down to earth, really down to the body, right? It's carnal. This is about what?
Sex.
It's about sex, okay? And we've been studying all of this music. It's sacred music. Now, at this time, especially with the publishing industry, this music has always been sung, right? These topics have always been sung about, but now there's a reason to print them. There's a reason to sell them. They're entertainment songs, right? Have you ever read Chaucer's Canterbury Tales? Did you read that in high school? That gets pretty lewd, right? And so there's always been a place for body entertainment, and this is an example of that. I'm going to play you another humorous song by Orlando di Lasso. So if you turn the page, and this is a piece called Audite Nova. Audite Nova, which means hear the news. And this piece, what language does Audite Nova sound like? It's Latin, absolutely. But this is not actually a Latin song. It's actually in German. So Audite Nova is Latin, but then it switches to German very shortly thereafter. So what I want to ask you, I'm not going to describe this piece for you. Again, you can listen, follow along with the text, okay, instead of following along with the music. And I want to ask you, based on what you know up to this point in music history, what is Lasso trying to do? How is he trying to dupe us as listeners? Okay? Think about yourselves as Renaissance listeners. Here we go. What's the joke?
Oh, wait, like, what? Oh, right. So that's allowed to change from triple to duple.
Okay, there is some change from triple to duple. Yeah. What else?
It's only it's acting like a motet for like 5 bars, and it's immediately a German song.
Yeah. How many of you heard that? At the opening Audite Nova, for a very short time, it sounds like we're going to get a very serious, very somber Latin motet, right? What do you expect a motet to be? Sacred or secular?
Sacred.
Sacred, absolutely. At this point, motets are almost exclusively sacred, right? And so he very suddenly turns that on its head. He goes from this Ars Perfecta style motet opening to this very homophonic style of German Lied, okay, the German Lied. And in the end, they don't start talking about anything sacred or very high. They talk about very base things like eating a goose, right? Cooking it, eating it, devouring it, okay? And so Orlando di Lasso had a bit of a humorous side. Again, why? Why is there a need for this humorous side? Remember, the publishing industry, the music publishing industry, is now ramping up in the middle of the 16th century, okay? They are creating and publishing, printing part books. These part books would be sung by amateurs, they would be sung by literate and often elite audiences for entertainment, okay? And so there's a market for it. And that's why this is now being printed and it's being preserved. Make sense? A little bit of a different rationale, right, than church music, which is preserved because it functions liturgically within the church. Okay? So now we have marketplace forces that are really coming in to play. This is a major shift. Now, lest you think that Lasso was just a big joker, right? He did write serious music, and I want to play one of his Latin motets for you. It's the next piece. If you just flip the page, it's called Prophetiae Sibilarum. Okay? This is a motet. If it's a motet, we expect it to be in what language? Latin. Indeed, it is in Latin, and it stays in Latin, unlike Audite Nova. And This is a set of pieces, motets, several of them, on the topic of the Sibyls. The Sibyls are from classical antiquity, mythology, in which they were prophetesses. Okay? And so this piece begins by saying, this is the introduction to the entire work, these songs on the Sibyls. And it says this, the text says, "These songs proceed by chromatic progressions. They tell of how the 12 Sibyls, one after the other, once sang hidden mysteries of our salvation." Okay? So this is just the introduction, and notice the opening couple words of this piece are, these songs proceed by chromatic progressions. As you listen to this, notice what happens on that word chromatic. In the text it's chromatico. Okay? Notice what happens musically at that point in the text. Here we go. What happens on chromatic? The music becomes chromatic, right? It's amazing. It says chromatic and music becomes chromatic. What does this mean? You know, what could this possibly mean? This is what we mean. This is an example of what we mean when we talk about text expression. Okay, there's a word in the poem, and what does the composer do to set that word? The composer expresses the meaning of that word through music. Okay? In your choirs, maybe, if you have been in choir, maybe you've heard the term word painting. That's what we're talking about. It's another word for that. But text expression gives a broader meaning, and word painting is just one option for text expression. Okay? So, at this point, in this particular piece, I want to update a story that we've been following for a while now, and that is chromaticisms in music, right? In the medieval mind, there's only one note that is able to change. What is that note? B, right? B or B flat. Now we've understood that at times, later, composers used musica ficta to get around that, right? Where there are these imagined accidentals in the music, okay? But it was all kind of in the mind. By the end of the 16th century, that has ended, and now we have a full chromatic scale, largely through the efforts of people like Lasso and the Madrigalists, exploring ever more intense chromaticisms in the music, such that the theory had to catch up. Okay, so now at the end of the 16th century, we have all chromatic possibilities, all 12 tones and semitones, okay? And now we do even have accidentals written into the music, sharps and flats, okay? So that's just an update on that. Okay. What do you think of Orlando di Lasso? Kind of an interesting composer, right? We've only scratched the surface. This guy was prolific, interesting, and funny, right? Okay, but we must move on, and we're going to now talk about the 16th century madrigal. Long story short, you ready? I'm going to give you my conclusions now. You ready? Over the course of the 16th century, due to the efforts of Orlando di Lasso and especially the Italian madrigalists, composers took text expression to ever higher limits in the 16th century. Okay? So whereas we've talked about one stream, which is the ars perfecta in the church style, in secular choral music, really the guiding current here is how do we make our music more expressive of the text? How can we be more sensitive to what is in the poetry based on what we compose? Make sense? Okay, so everything that we talk about with the Italian madrigal is going to be trying to get at evidence of that. Okay? All right. Now, before we get into that, I want us to look at this picture here. Can you see it all right? Mm-hmm. Yeah? What do you see here? Just describe for me what you see.
People reading music.
Women.
Okay, we see both women and men. What else?
Studying music.
Reading music.
They're reading music, right? This music would have been printed music. Now, I don't know if you can tell this or not, but these are part books. These are not scores. That means that you would only have your part in a book. That's why it's called a part book, right? And there's no score, okay? There's no score that would have even been printed, okay? You would just sing your part from the part book together. Now, where are they?
Outside, have a picnic.
Outside, maybe on a picnic. They're enjoying the country. They're not in a church, right? Okay. What else do you notice about this that can tell us something about the performance of the Italian Madrigal?
No one's there to sing.
Sorry?
They're alone, no audience.
No audience, right? They're not singing it for anyone, or are they? Who are they singing it for? Themselves, right? This is a pastime. The singing of madrigals is a pastime. It's a diversion. It's done for pleasure, for fun. What else do you notice? These are excellent observations.
They're upper class.
They would definitely be upper class, upper middle class, or elite nobility. Yeah. What else? How many to a part? One to a part. Yeah. So if you've ever heard a madrigal, likely you heard it with at least 3 or 4 to a part, or maybe 2 to a part, right? But very often these would be performed in this context, perhaps by amateurs, right? And simply for pleasure. Okay? So that's the context here. Now, as we talk about As we talk about 16th century music, let's widen our lens just for a moment, and let's look at the breadth of secular music in the 16th century. First, we can distinguish specific national styles and genres in the 16th century, the first of which is the Spanish villancico. The villancico is a secular choral genre which also can be used in a sacred context. And Juan de la Encina is an example of a Spanish composer who was writing at this time. And the villancico can also be found in the New World, okay, in the 17th century especially, and even in the 16th century. So think South America especially for the villancico. All right? In Italian styles, we have the frottola. The frottola is a precursor to the madrigal. And of course we have the madrigal. Now you have a frottola in your anthologies. I would like for you to listen to that. Okay, what about the French? Well, the French were creating new styles of chanson, one of which is called the Parisian chanson, and was more of an urban style. There are some really, really interesting Parisian chansons. Let me just tell you about one of them. Okay, if I can have your attention. There's this piece by a guy named Claude Lejeune, and it's all about street criers in Paris. And so he puts into music, you know, have you ever been to like a baseball game and they're like, peanuts, get your peanuts, right? In a marketplace in Renaissance Paris, you would have all these different people calling out as you walk down the market, right? Like, get your hot raspberries here, you know, and they would have these little songs. And Claude Lejeune put all of this into a song. If you want, I'll put it on Spotify so you can hear it. It's really interesting. But this is an example of a Parisian chanson. It's more of an urban style. And it was part of the style that Lasso was emulating in that first song, Je l'aime bien. Okay, also German lieder. So German lieder, how many of you vocalists have sung a German art song, like a German lied from the 19th century? Just a couple of you. But maybe you've heard some, like a Schubert song or a Schumann song, right? This is a different genre, right? They're both called a Lied because Lied is the German word for song. Okay? These are typically part songs. That means probably 4 parts, like the one that we heard earlier, the one about the goose, right? Audite nova. Okay? And the English also are creating choral genres, one of which is the English madrigal. The English madrigal, as you might expect, is a response to the Italian madrigal. and is later on in the 16th century. Maybe you've sung some Thomas Morley or Thomas Weelkes or even John Dowland. Any guitarists in the room? Guitarists? Have you ever played John Dowland lute songs?
I sang with that.
Yeah, like "Flow My Tears" is a popular one, and it almost sounds like singer-songwriter stuff today. It can be easily translated into that. Okay, so here we have the wide swath of national styles, and we're going to focus on the madrigal specifically. Okay. Now, why are we going to focus on the Italian madrigal? Here's the reason, above all. The Italian madrigal is the most important secular choral genre of the 16th century, and it was the most popular genre of the 16th century. Remember, now that we have the marketplace in play, we can have true popularity, right? That we can kind of, like a marketplace demand, and then supply by the composers. And at the core of the Italian madrigal is this quest for ever more intricate expression of text. Okay? That's that long story short. You remember that? That's the theme, the thread that goes through here, the expression of text. Now, if expression of text becomes important, it makes sense that the poetry would also be important. You can't just set any poem and expect to have a beautiful musical expression, right? The poem has to be good, and it has to conform to some of the ideas of what the composers want to do, right? As any singer-songwriter would know, right? If you've ever tried to work with somebody else's lyrics, or if you've ever tried to provide lyrics for somebody else, it can be difficult, right? Okay. Now, as we discuss these poems, we're going to talk about madrigalisms. Let me tell you what a madrigalism is. You ready for this? A madrigalism is a compositional technique in which a key word in the poem is expressed through the compositional setting by word painting or a harmonic emphasis. Okay? Should I say that again?
Yes.
Okay. A madrigalism is a compositional technique in which a key word is interpreted or expressed through the music. You could even say its meaning is mirrored in the music through word painting or harmonic emphasis. How about an example? You already know an example. An example of a madrigalism is chromatic. That Orlando di Lasso setting of chromatic, because what's the word? Chromatic. What does he do with the music? Makes it chromatic, right? Okay, that is a madrigalism. That is, it's a key word in which the composer has taken it and expressed it through the text. Got it? That's what a madrigalism is, all right? Okay. And another kind of story we've been following, right? You remember the Franco-Flemish were kind of the top of the heap for a while in the 15th century. Cambrai was like the Juilliard, and everyone studied from there and then dispersed throughout Europe. You remember that? Well, by the end of the 16th century, after all of those Franco-Flemish composers had ended up in Italy, because Italy is not a unified country at this time. Instead, it's lots of individual principalities, which means a lot of opportunities for jobs for musicians. You can get into this court or that court, you know, and you can get paid well and so forth. So by the end of the 16th century, that weight has shifted from the Franco-Flemish, the Netherlands, and the Low Countries, down into Italy. Now, Italy is the fount out of which innovation comes, okay? All right? Okay, this is an introduction to the Italian madrigal. And so the way we're going to do this is we're going to talk about 3 generations, okay? Again, this is kind of, you know, this is a small lie in that it's not like there was a first generation, second generation, third, but it's a way for us to organize an entire century. Okay? So we'll talk about general characteristics of the first generation, which is 1525 to 1550. Then we will talk about the second generation, which stretches about from the 1540s to the 60s. And then the third generation, which is the 60s to the 1610s. So, how far does madrigalism, or do madrigals stretch? From about 1525 to about 1610. This is its core period of flourish. And what happens is, there are a couple madrigals after 1610, but what happens in 1600 that kind of takes over the attention of the entire musical world? Opera, right? Opera comes on the scene in 1600, and everything else kind of falls by the wayside, actually. Okay, so let's start with the first generation. The first generation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you general characteristics, and then we're going to look at an example from each generation, okay? By the way, these are all online already, just like they have been all semester. So, first generation, typically 4 voices, can be sung by amateurs. They aren't that incredibly difficult, right? They're mostly homophonic, with sometimes a touch of imitation. Imitation is used sparingly, okay? And for effect. And most of the settings are declamatory. Why? Because what are they trying to express? The text, right? Text expression. And so declamatory means that the text will come through in performance. Okay? The key madrigal words or madrigalisms are piangendo, moro, and more. Piangendo means weeping. Okay? Moro means I die. And more means death. Okay? Piangendo, moro, more. And our example for this first generation is going to be Jacques Arcadelt, a Franco-Flemish composer who ended up in Italy. And we're going to look at this piece, Il Bianco e Dolce Cigno. Has anyone sung Il Bianco e Dolce Cigno? Okay, just one. Okay. By the way, are you learning your parts to this? Because next time, Wednesday, we're going to sing this piece together. So you need to learn your part. If you don't learn your part, then we won't be able to do it. All right? Yes? Oh, come on, you should be more excited about it.
Yeah.
I know. It's going to be awesome.
Yay!
All right. Okay, so let me show you let's start with the text. When we deal with madrigals, you always start with the text, right? So the text is this. Would someone please read this for us? Volunteer, nice and loud. Thank you, Emily.
The white and gentle swan dies singing, and I, weeping, approach the end of my life. Strange and diverse fates that he dies disconsolate.
Disconsolate.
Okay, and I die happy. Death that in the dying fills me wholly with joy and desire. If in dying I feel no other pain, I would be content to die as a thousand times a day.
Okay.
Sorry.
So okay. 1, 2, 3, you're all madrigal composers. Boom. Okay? Now you are all madrigal composers. You have to set this text. What words, based on what you know so far, what words would you focus on for special emphasis? Dies, right? Okay, are there any words about dying in here? Well, there's more, right? More, moro, morire, right? Morir, mort, right? Okay, there's a whole lot of this dying stuff, and we'll figure out what that means in due course. But at this point, okay, so dying definitely. What else?
Weeping.
Weeping, piangendo, right? Weeping. What else? Anything else?
Pain.
Cantando, okay. How might you set cantando to express singing?
Yeah.
You could sing it, yeah. Here's a question. How would you express more, or how would you express piangendo? If you were the composer, how might you do that? How would you paint that in the music?
like some kind of like descending line.
Maybe a descent, yeah? Piangendo, because what do you do when you weep? You know, this kind of like sighing, this sob, it's a downward motion, right? Okay, all right. There's one other that I want to draw your attention to, and that is 1,000 times, okay? Any number word is ripe for expression, and we'll see kind of how that works in just a moment. Okay, so these are the elements that are emphasized. Now I want to play this for you. Turn to number 59, page 220, and we'll listen to that now. As you're turning there, this is what I'm going to ask you once we're done. I'm going to ask you, how does Jacques Arcadelt express the text through his music? Okay? How does he express the text? Here we go. And actually what I will tell you 1,000 times is this 10,000 morts. That means 1,000 times. So listen for 10,000 morts at the end. Here we go. Okay. Tell me, some of our focus words here. How did Jacques Arcadelt express the text? Mike?
With the D-meaning word.